when I stepped into that role, I really stepped into it burned out. I was just really tired. I think any nonprofit who made it through COVID that is self-funded, probably they all need a hug, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's been hard. There's just,
Mhm.
it's been difficult. And so I became the CEO in the end of that. And I was like, I am fresh out. There
Yeah.
are no more answers in me. And I was also really tapping into a rhythm of life and boundaries and trying to be as healthy of a leader as possible. So all that's happening at the same time.
Hey, welcome to Wealth Beyond Riches. Today, we're continuing the conversation with Kristen Welch, CEO of Mercy House Global, a leading nonprofit organization solving some of the world's biggest problems. I have to thank my wife, Jen, for making this connection with Kristen and introducing me to some of her life-changing work. In fact, before we hit record, Jen jumped on the call and got the chance to connect with Kristen and just thank her for the impact that she had on her life as a young mom, reading her blog and just reading the real things that Kristen was dealing with in her own life. It gave her a lot of purpose and strength, and I think listening today is going to do that for you too. If you have not gotten the chance to check out Mercy House Global and their life-changing work, number one, you can support them by giving and making an investment in what they're doing. We'll have that in the show notes. Also, you can buy things from their store. So one of the things that they do is they empower women to break the bonds of generational poverty in Kenya, also in the US. And so people who have been rescued from human trafficking, people who have been rescued from slums and then given a dignified job to work in, which Kristen will talk about. You can buy some of their goods that they have made. There is some great stuff for your kitchen. There's some great stuff, the jewelry or gifts. So check it out. It's an amazing gift. And it brings so much more meaning than just, buying something off of Amazon. So please go check it out in the show notes. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conversation. This is going to be good. You talked about having a sabbatical recently.
Yes.
Tell me how that came about. As a leader, some companies have them, some don't.
Yeah.
You started the company, so I guess the decision's yours. Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, my bosses are board of directors. Most CEO nonprofits answer to a board, but most of them hadn't, heard or participated in a sabbatical. And I really, when I stepped in, I've been the founder and I was the executive director for 12 years. And so I've only been the CEO for 2 years. And when I stepped into that role, I really stepped into it burned out. I was just really tired. And there's been a lot of crises in, I think, any nonprofit who made it through COVID that is self-funded, probably they all need a hug, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's been hard. There's just, it's been difficult. And so I really became the CEO on the tail end of all of that. And then we just had our organization really became vulnerable through things that were out of our control. We had a fire that destroyed one of the homes that we operate in Kenya. And then we had our warehouse in Texas collapsed. And so we just really went through some big crises and really felt vulnerable as an organization. Are we going to make it? And so I became the CEO in the end of that. Well, people go to the CEO because the CEO has answers. And I was like, I am fresh out. There are no more answers in me. And I was also really tapping into a rhythm of life and boundaries and trying to be as healthy of a leader as possible. So all that's happening at the same time. And so really, for all of 2022, there was like a soundtrack in my head that went something like, I'm not going to sing, but basically, I felt wooed and invited to step away from my life as I knew it and create some space to process and to heal and to grow. And I think my growth was stunted because when you have so many crises, all at once, you just are responding and reacting. Yeah. And I'd stopped being proactive, and visionaries need to look ahead. And I was just like sucked into this looking behind me or just dealing with the present. And so I listened to that voice, I think, is probably why I took a sabbatical. And it's probably not traditional, but the first thing I did as the CEO was ask for a sabbatical because I knew that I did not have much left to give. And really, I think there's an old theologian that talks a lot about burnout. His name is Henry Nouwen, and he says that burnout is a convenient psychological term for spiritual death.
Hmm.
And that really struck a chord with me because I would use the word, I think I'm burned out. I would say that, which is vulnerable and it was honest. Nobody, I mean, people are inspired when you say you're burned out.
Yeah.
It sounds like a prayer request, right? It's
Mhm.
sad, but it was a way of me saying I am spiritually dying, but I didn't realize I was saying that. I
Yeah.
had no space for God. And I literally, if there's any Christian leaders listening, or maybe Tim, you'll identify with this, but I had almost believed this lie that doing things for God was the same as being with God.
Mhm.
And that is deception. That is not true.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that it is a plague in the church and parachurch ministries, right? Like we have somehow believed that if we do things that are spiritual, that is the same as beings, with God. And it's not.
Mhm.
And yeah, my sabbatical, there was a lot hinging on it, I think. I did not know if I would return to work because
Mm.
I got to this place where as the founder and visionary, I've always cared passionately about everything. Every decision, I will always have an opinion about it,
Yeah.
which is a problem. I think it's founder syndrome and you got to get out of the way and let people do their thing.
Yeah.
But I got to this place where instead of having an opinion, I would answer, I don't know. I would just say, I don't know. Like someone comes to me with a question or a problem and my immediate response was, I don't know. And I think I just didn't have anything left. I had no more ideas, no more. I wasn't creative any longer. My growth was stunted. I was going through the motions. That shifted to I don't care, which is very dangerous, right?
Mhm.
So from I have all the answers to I don't know to I don't care. I don't care what you do to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Just don't bring it to me. And that's pretty honest. That's where I was. And I went on a sabbatical a year ago this month.
Okay.
And most of this is going to sound terrible to some people. It sounded terrible to me. I didn't plan for this, but most of it was spent in solitude and silence. And the first 10 minutes, I read this book called Silence and The Invitation to Silence and Solitude by Ruth Barton.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to get through it. I read it at the beginning of my sabbatical because I knew that I needed to turn down the noise somehow. And I had heard that a spiritual discipline that was really needed in our noisy world and that would help. It was appealing to me. Something about it appealed to me, even though it terrified me, which sounds so ridiculous that in our day and age, we're scared to be alone with ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? That's a red flag. And that was me. I had a panic attack the first 10 minutes. I tried to sit in silence and solitude without my phone. And that's where I started the sabbatical. And ended up breaking my foot on the first day
Oh,
of
no.
my sabbatical, which is kind of ironic and also funny, pretty painful. Never broken a bone in my life. And so the odds of that happening when I needed to slow down, I'm like, I hear you, God. That was a great chess move. I get it.
Were you mountain biking? Were you like, I can't handle the silence. I'm just going to mountain bike.
Yeah, it's really funny looking back on it, but in the moment it was terrible. But I basically couldn't drive or leave my house. My family, my husband had a business trip for 3 weeks in Egypt and my kids were still in college, my youngest, so it was just a lot of isolated time.
Yeah.
I had told my staff that I wanted a no contact sabbatical because so much of it, I was just very enmeshed with the organization and it was a wilderness experience that literally, I also was in therapy and had a spiritual director. So I wasn't doing this alone. Highly recommend that. And I just processed so much. I think we just we never have to be alone if we don't want to be. We can take our
Mm-hmm.
phones to the bathrooms with us. Like we
Mm-hmm.
we never have to be alone with our thoughts. And when we aren't, we are not actively dealing with what is burdening down our souls.
Mm-hmm.
And so silence and solitude is a practice that allows us to do that. And in this book that I recommended, she has some really great tips and ideas, because so many people are like, the minute I sit down, I'm so distracted. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of guidance, and I would, open that every morning and just try to practice it. And it's now part of my rule of life. That's the first thing I do in the morning. After I make a cup of coffee, I sit in silence and solitude, and whatever surfaces, whether it's a conversation from the day before, a worry, a concern, something I need to confess, like something I got wrong. If we are quiet enough, that will surface and we can
Mm-hmm.
deal with it. If we
Yeah.
don't deal with it, we just shove it down and shove it down and shove it down, and then it comes out sideways on other people. And, we're constantly being formed into a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
And we've all met people who are just bitter and angry and negative and could be kind of mean. Or we've met, older people who are the exact opposite. You just want to sit with them. They're humble, they're kind, they are wise. It's because they were formed by either their circumstances or by God.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a choice, and that starts with processing all the stuff,
Yeah.
right? The job loss, the bad investment, the broken relationship. If we don't deal with it, that grief just comes out in ways that are unhealthy. And I truly believe shortens our life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there is some science around people who never take a day of rest and that they live, shorter lives. And sometimes we are slowed down because we don't make a choice to slow down, right? Like our health will slow us down.
Our foot might slow
Yeah,
you down.
a broken foot.
Again, about a couple of times people brought up, the very famous Psalm 23.
Mhm.
And it's, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down.
Yes.
And oftentimes we need to be forced into a place of rest.
Yes.
Which is not the first choice. That's not
Right.
plan A, I don't think. Plan A is what you're talking about, which is that regular rhythm of rest. And for you, Kristen, you started Mercy House Global in 2010 and Sabbatical was 2023?
Yes.
Okay. So 13 years in was when you did yours. You've told me you've thought about offering this to your team, your staff.
Yeah.
What do you think about a good rhythm is? You've modeled it.
Yeah.
Now, how do you want to set it up for everybody else?
Yeah. So actually, I regret not taking one sooner. I mean, I think that I never, ever want anyone to get to the place that I was.
Yeah.
Spiritual death is pretty doom and gloom. Let's do better. Learn from my mistake and not knowing what to ask for.
You mentioned 3 really good things that I thought was amazing, almost like a sliding scale of going from loving what you're doing, having all the answers, to, not that you had all the answers, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know to I don't care.
Yeah.
Is there one of those where it's okay, I should probably do something here?
Yeah, I definitely think when you start answering things I don't know, you have no more space. There's no more space in your soul.
Yeah.
And I think what was so profound, without getting too, I don't know, I'm not really, a woohoo person at all. Or, I mean, some people, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm pretty grounded. But it was like layer after layer, all the way back to my childhood, of stuff that just I was defensive about. I think being a defensive person is a sign something is wrong. I had a low simmer anger that I didn't know where it came from. And so the more the layers came off, and it was like I found, it's so weird to say this, but I feel like once all those layers were gone, I found like me underneath all of that. And all of that was like changing who I was. And so I just felt so free. And actually, my husband asked me about, I don't know, 8 weeks into my sabbatical, he literally was like, have you been talking to your therapist about being angry? And I said, no, actually, that hasn't come up one time. And then I was like, why? What are you about to say? And he was like, I don't know. It's weird. He was like, because I've never been like, a screamer or a timber, but there was just this like reaction and it
Hmm.
would go away really quickly, but almost like a fire starting.
Yeah.
And I never knew the cause of it. And he was like, that is gone.
Hmm.
That is gone. It has
Wow.
totally been diffused. And, when your family is like, something about you is different,
Hmm.
something about you is different because they get all your crap. Your
Hmm.
family gets the worst of you. And so when my family began, my young adult children were like, Mom, I want this. Like, what is
Hmm.
happening in you?
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm slowing down. It was not, it's really not radical thinking here,
Yeah.
but it was, yeah, just taking time for myself and connecting
Yeah.
and realizing how small I was and all of these things. I think we did enact a sabbatical policy, and we basically are doing it by how long you've been at the organization. And
Okay.
so one of my leaders has been at the organization. She's starting her 9th year. She is due, and she starts her sabbatical in 2 weeks. And so I had meetings yesterday about, because it's a lot of work to take a sabbatical. You
Yeah.
spend about 6 months planning and preparing and handing
Okay.
off things. So I
Hmm.
had a meeting with her yesterday. So I have 3 more people in line behind her. And it takes a lot of planning and a lot of intention, but I think it is a great way to care for our people. And so once you hit 7 years at our organization, which is kind of the traditional time to take a sabbatical, but we have enacted a lot of other policies for people who haven't quite hit that 7 years. Anyone can take a clarity break, paid 1 hour a week, just to go clear their head, whatever that looks like for you. Is
Yeah.
it take a walk, go sit in a sanctuary, whatever that looks like for you? There's no questions asked. We provide counseling for our staff where we will pay for your first few therapy visits. We are a trauma-informed workplace, and that comes with a lot of just care and concern and listening. And I think as leaders, we have an opportunity to, actually, I'm going to interrupt myself. Eugene Peterson, who wrote the translation of the Message Bible, he said before he passed away that the workplace is the #1 place for spiritual formation.
Hmm.
And that stopped me in my tracks. I was like, what a responsibility as a leader, as someone who is over a workplace. So when I returned from my sabbatical, everyone is, sabbatical reentry is pretty important. And there was a lot of, what did God tell you? Like the writing in the
Yeah.
sky.
Right.
What are you going to do to save the company or whatever?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I don't have any of that. But what I do have is, I had some breadcrumbs. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of people.
Mm.
Because our organization, the mission is to empower vulnerable people, but we can't do that if we're sick ourselves. And
Yeah.
so we've enacted a lot of structure to take care of our people so that we can take care of people. And, we're a 15-year-old nonprofit that is self-funded. And, I started it and didn't know anything really about any of this. And so we've learned, I think like Google and places like that are already, providing some of that for their teams and staff. But we just have an opportunity to see our workplace as an opportunity to create space within our work day for people to connect with each other and with God, whether you're a
Yeah.
Christian workplace or not. Lunch breaks or before work, letting Bible studies happen or restorative yoga, or, there's so many things that we can do. We have 2 hours a week of what we call, basically it's a class. It's by invitation. So you don't have to participate. We don't, it's not a part of anyone's job, but it's an opportunity to learn about spiritual formation and
Mm.
what we've read a lot of books together. And we're just growing, right? Growing and trying to create a vulnerable community that is
Yeah.
accountable to each other within the workplace. And I feel like we're kind of in like a beta testing because there's not a lot of research or data or curriculum for organizations or companies to do this in the workplace. But
Yeah.
I do believe that what Eugene Peterson said was right, because
Hmm.
if our trials and our blessings and our tests shape us, right? Like we have an opportunity no matter what is put in our hands. to be grateful, have perspective, right? To learn from those things and not let those things turn us into greedy people or into angry people, then work is where a lot of our pain and suffering comes from, right?
Hmm.
Conflict with coworkers and high turnover and all of that. And so I'm like, this is an opportunity to teach and to model with our staff that just because you had a bad day doesn't mean it's a bad job. Let's create a place where you can use your voice and you can advocate for yourself and you can, right? Like it all goes together. And I think we
Hmm.
leave that out of the workplace to our own detriment. And
Hmm.
so far it's going well. I'm really glad we're
Yeah.
doing it. And, you know, I have lots of book recommendations if anyone is interested.
Awesome. What's at the top of that list?
I anything by John Mark Comer is
Uh-huh.
probably worth reading. What's interesting about him, like our team read The Relentless Elimination of Hurry
Mm.
together, and we've read Practicing the Way. He has other books, Live No Lies. There's an incredible book called Emotional Healthy Spirituality by
Mhm.
Peter Scazzaro. But what John Mark Comer does is not to say he doesn't have original ideas, but he is a great compiler
Yeah.
of brilliant people's ideas and a lot of
Yeah.
things that have sort of been lost or left behind. And every
Yeah.
30 to 40 years, there's a revival of what people call spiritual formation because it's not being taught in churches.
Mhm.
And yet we're all being formed every day. And
Right.
so we're currently in like a revival of spiritual formation. And he's probably leading it because he's taking all of the content information from, the last two or three revivals back from the 1900s and compiling that into new books like
Yeah.
Practicing the Way. And so they're very helpful. Ruth Haley Barton also has a book called From Sabbath to Sabbatical.
Mm.
And she really frames like a sabbatical is really a long run of Sabbaths and how to practically walk through that and why
Mm.
we need it.
Yeah.
It's just a very good resource.
Yeah. Those are great. We've been talking a lot about spiritual formation, and I think, for anybody unfamiliar with the term, you said it, Kristen, we're all being formed by something.
Could be.
And if you think about social media or our phones or technology, you think about the history of the world. A friend was just telling me this the other day. And if you had a timeline of the entire world and then the timeline we've had these smartphones, that percentage of time that we've had this thing that's forming us at 2,
Mhm.
3, 4, 7 hours a day,
Right.
we don't know anything about it. Yet there are these timeless, not just traditions, but practices and rules of life that have been shown to bring healing and health and wholeness
Right.
to people.
Right.
And you giving that to your team and instilling that in them on a regular basis, like you're building culture. You as an organization are repairing broken parts of the world,
Yeah.
and you're creating beauty that's glorifying to the creator and is helping tons of people. And so it makes sense. It doesn't make sense on one
Right.
end when you think
Right.
about society and where we're at. And if you just
Yeah.
work harder, that's going to be rewarded. Instead, it's let's work out of the wholeness of who God has made us,
We-
who we've been created to be,
Yeah.
because we've been created to do great things.
Yeah.
So let's walk in that.
And I think, believe in biblical principles and some people don't. And
Hmm.
I think that's between them and God. I think there are principles that, return on investment. And I think when we, practice something like Sabbath and take a day of rest, we're investing in our own souls.
Hmm.
When we, you know, share some of the resources we've been given and not keep them all for ourselves, that is a biblical principle, right?
Hmm.
Generosity and giving is a spiritual discipline. And whether we ascribe to all of them or not, there are truths that, you know, we practice because of what we get out of them.
Hmm.
And so I think there's just so many opportunities. And that's really what spiritual disciplines are for. They create space in your soul, which I think we all need, right? A high school student to a retiree. We're
Hmm.
just, between algorithms and social media. And honestly, what you brought up, the smartphone, we are being shaped, in ways we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And the statistics on all of that, like how many times we touch our phone a day and how many people sleep with it beside their bed, right? Like it owns us. And I mean, one of my kids at one point started crying at the dinner table and was like, "What's wrong? I think I'm addicted to my phone." And I was like, "Me too.
Yeah.
How do we stop this, And she
Oh.
she knows nothing about spiritual formation. She was just like, "I don't like this. I don't like this feeling." That's something in our soul just saying, I don't feel better after I've been on it for 7 hours. I feel worse. And so between a rule of life and practicing some of these things, I think it's so countercultural, and it feels like a whisper in a crowd of screaming people, but we can't hear the whisper if we don't turn down the noise. And I think that is right now what I have to say about my life is I've turned
Yeah.
down the noise. And what's so incredible is I can hear things I haven't heard before. And that just feels really good. I have so much clarity and discernment. And I know that's because I'm quieting that noise and connecting with something bigger than myself. And so that's a principle I believe in. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing that. Your words are a breath of fresh air in a really kind of crazy world right now.
yeah.
You said something many minutes ago, but it was something about like our hurried life is violence against our own souls.
Mm.
And I think that's really true. So your sabbatical, and also when you jumped into your sabbatical, it was hard. So these practices
Oh,
of stopping and resting is extremely difficult to begin with.
yeah. So this is probably a bad example, but I turned 50 this past year and decided that I wanted to do something like, I just really want to challenge myself physically. I'm
Hmm.
not an athlete, but I am currently training to hike the rim to rim in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, wow.
And it's happening in 11 months from now. And I just
Nice.
started training for that.
Yeah.
And as I'm on the Stairmaster and trying to walk, and it's just, I'm very intimidated by all of it and overwhelmed because I don't feel like I can do it, but that makes me want
Mm.
to do it. And
Yeah.
then I just want to be in like this beautiful place God created. And I don't know, I feel compelled to do this, even though
Hmm.
it physically hurts to do it.
Yeah.
And as I'm on the stair stepper and I'm like sweating and like trying to get to the time that I have allotted for myself and just, I'm making myself do it. But it's because of what it's preparing me for,
Hmm.
right? What I'm going to experience. And I also don't want to die in the Grand Canyon. I don't
Yeah.
want that to be
Right.
the end of my story. And I've heard every time someone here, "Oh, you're doing that," and they tell me a terrible story of someone who did not
No.
prepare enough. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that I need to walk around the block again. But it's such a parallel to this spiritual journey and to really
Mm.
the life journey that we're on.
Yeah.
Good things are hard to come by.
Hmm.
And practicing spiritual disciplines, I don't know. I think anything Jesus did is considered a spiritual discipline. And so whether it was, silence and solitude or fasting or prayer, or reading scripture, generosity, all those things, hospitality, I don't think there's like a finite number of spiritual disciplines. It's whatever
Yeah.
Jesus did. And I probably, you know, am doing 4 kind of okay. I mean,
Hmm.
I haven't mastered anything. I am not an expert on any of this, but it's created enough that I want more of it. And I think that's what exercise does too, right? Like
Hmm.
you feel so incredible after you finish. I mean, when I get off the Stairmaster, I'm just like, I did it. I can
Hmm.
do this. It's my own pep talk. I
Yeah.
know I can do it because I did it. And even though I'm going to have to add time and it's going to get harder and harder, by the time I get there, all of this practice is going to allow me to hike the Grand Canyon. And so
Yeah.
our lives are that way. If we don't just get places, we have to set our course and follow the breadcrumbs and keep that
Mm.
big dream ahead of us. What do we want to
Mm.
do?
Yeah.
And then do it.
Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. But you could die, so be
I
careful.
I mean, seriously, my son is, "Mom, you need to be drinking like a gallon of water every day." Prepare.
Plus
He's in
the
medical school, so
electrolytes. Yeah, and salt. You need
yeah,
salt too.
yeah. He's like, you're going to expand your blood vessels and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay.
Okay, science.
Yeah,
Um,
science.
The people who tell you horror stories, just start flipping it around on them and being like, are you going to get in your car today and drive somewhere? Because you could die.
Yeah, that's so true.
Hey, I love to end every episode by asking this one question. I don't even know if I told you about this question. It'll be easy. What is one thing that you are loving right now? It could be anything. It could be a person, a practice, a book, just one thing.
Let's see. I mean, maybe that I'm exercising,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to the training, but
Yeah.
also just being outside. I love nature, and I live outside of Houston, and so it's just not a naturey place. We're kind of known for being ugly, I think, and it's hot, but we're having a cold front right now, which is kind of funny because it's 80 instead of 100. But this morning when I got up, there was a breeze, and I think I've slowed down enough to enjoy, it's maybe I'm becoming elderly also because I talk a lot about the birds and the weather. But I think I've just slowed down long enough to enjoy what's in front of me. And so
Mm-hmm.
there are, someone actually asked me this question last week at a luncheon, and I think I gave an answer that depressed everyone. And so I wasn't going to share that, but they said, what is bringing you joy right now? And all I could think about was James chapter 1 that said, consider it joy when you face trials of many kinds. It has been a really trying year personally. And that has put me at the feet of Jesus because I don't have what I need to get through my trials. And so I understand a little bit more what it means to consider it joy, because we're going to have trials and suffering in our lives and pain, and there's things going to be out of our control. But just having the perspective that God is he doesn't waste anything. He's going to use it all. Yes, it is bringing me joy in a really weird, depressing way.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's so good. One thing I've been loving right now. So we had a cold front come through Chicago as well. So it's the 40s in the mornings, and the breeze is more like wind. That's really cold. But I've been turning the fireplace on in the morning before everybody else gets up, and just getting up and reading and getting my cup of coffee, my 19-pound beagle at my feet, like you were talking about, and just sitting in front of the fire for a little bit. It's nothing I've ever done in the morning. The fireplace is always a nighttime activity. And we recently took the TV out of the fireplace room. So it literally is seating, eating, and fireplace. And it's just been rather than the TV being the central part, we've tried to create the fireplace as the central part.
Good move. It's a good
for gathering
move.
And kids, they go there. Their friends are over and they're sitting in front of the fire.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? It worked.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, thank you, Kristen, so much for being on here. Thank you for sharing just really clearly and honestly what you're learning from your life. I think that's what's so beautiful about people's stories is everybody has a different, unique part, but anybody listening is going to be able to take away 1 or 2 or 3 things from what you said and identify with it. So thanks so much for that.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hey there. If this episode impacted you, would you share it with a friend right now? That would mean a lot to me. And even better, if you could leave a review of the show. Maybe mention what part of this conversation stuck with you. On the first Tuesday of each month, we're going to bring you some more stories of great leaders who have learned what it means to be truly wealthy. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to drop that on the first Thursday of each month. So keep an eye on that. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.